Right. So from the heat of the taxes all the way to the heat we're all facing right now, it's only mid-April, but India is already in the grip of intense heat wave. Over 20 cities have recorded the temperature above 42 degrees, with Barmer in Rajasthan hitting a scorching 46.4, nearly 7 degrees above the normal and above the average as well that generally April brings along.
Delhi has crossed the 40-degree mark, and the IMD warns that this is just the beginning of a summer that is expected to bring more heatwave days than we're used to. Extreme heat affects our health, it affects our cities and our daily lives.
That's right. So to understand how we adapt and build resilience, we'll turn to an environmentalist now. His name is Vimlendu Jha, founder of Switcha. He joins us this morning. Good morning. Thank you so much for being here. Oh, how lovely. There is a mud house behind you. You're clearly doing your bit to ensure that heat wave is controlled, at least in your environment. But you know, Mr. Jha, the fundamental question that I have every time heat wave comes in and every time we come to this part of the year is that so much of importance is paid on, okay, drink water, ensure you are safe, etc. But no fundamental solutions on how cities can do better. No fundamental solutions on what is it that the cities are not making for. How is it that our metros, if you could give me to start with 3 things that the metros are not doing and should be doing to avoid these intense extreme summer.
See, intense heat wave cannot be fought by drinking more water or staying indoor. As you know, we need to understand that heat waves are not just events. These are phenomena, and these are phenomena, a lot of times it's attributed to so-called global warming, and we try to attribute and blame global climate change as the reason for local heat wave conditions. But reality is the reason why certain pockets in certain urban areas, more to say, have these heat wave conditions are because of local conditions, and therefore, and you know, the problem is that we wake up to heat wave situation every year after year, because we only treat this as an event and not as a phenomena. Because you know, it's been recurring, it's been happening every year, and we think that, oh well, this year we've crossed a particular threshold, or in April we are 5 degrees more than what perhaps the normal trend should be. So the problem is in our understanding of the crisis. We look at one climate event as an isolated climate event. We still, as a policy, as a country, as a society, as a government, only looking at this year's 2025 heat wave as if there's not going to be any heat wave in 2026. And therefore, if we are actually looking at how do we save ourselves, we can perhaps, the rich can, you know, work from home and perhaps put 20 ACs in their living room. But reality is that the masses will have to deal with this, and it has implications on public health, on public earning, and mostly the crowd, people who actually work in the open, who do not have access to energy and cooling and perhaps also access to good health infrastructure that comes with heat wave. So last year we saw many people actually getting admitted. There is mortality and morbidity associated with this. But in the name of heat action plan, we only have copy-paste heat action plan for various towns. You know, we cannot have one heat action plan for the entire country, because we have different geographies, different climates, and different ways ideally to deal with heat wave conditions.
Can we ask you, Vimlendu, to put together a heat plan, action plan of your own, almost, for us right now, for a city like Delhi? And in that sense, point out the loopholes in previous action plans.
So we will have to look at short term and then intermediary, which is mid-term, medium-term strategies, and then long-term. Of course, if you look at short term, which perhaps the band-aid that we can use right now, because there's only that much that you can do in the month of April when the heat wave is already begun. You can't bring in systemic changes in a day or two or a week or a month in that sense. And that's only caution, precaution, some sort of an infrastructure emergency infrastructure that we need to build in public spaces, also in our hospitals and other things. So right now, this year, perhaps we will have to look at when people are going to face with heat wave conditions, and mostly the poorest of the poor, what is the public health infrastructure that we build? So maybe perhaps, create shades, create water vending machines, look at some sort of a, off day and compensation, monetary compensation for daily wage workers who should not be forced to work at 48 degrees and 50 degrees. And also in the hospitals, there needs to be special ICUs issues and wars for heat wave that perhaps we tried to do some bit of that, last year as well. In long term, we need to understand how are we urbanizing? How are cities like Delhi urbanizing? Do we need more and more roads and broader roads that we keep celebrating, or we actually need more and more green cover? The entire heat island that we are actually creating and celebrating that, unfortunately, the kind of urbanization, the fanciness of our broad roads. You and I can reach Dehradun in perhaps 3 hours and don't realize that we've actually sacrificed lakhs and lakhs of trees to really become faster. But becoming faster and staying stupid is something that cannot really work when we look at medium-term and long-term heat wave situations. And that's exactly, we need to understand that infrastructure is not just cement. Infrastructure is also nature, is also climate-friendly and sustainable infrastructure, and the pathway to development and growth that we need to actually adapt as a government.
Mr. Jha, all very relevant points that you are bringing up. But my question is a little more fundamental here. Are we to understand that Indian metro cities are fundamentally flawed in the way they are designed to tackle with extreme climate conditions? Are we looking at that?
Absolutely, because when we look at climate conditions and we look at cities, then you have to look at, of course, land, is what we look at cities as. And land is something which is not the only thing. We will have to look at forest. You look at old cities when they were designed 500 years ago, or perhaps a couple of, or 1,000 years ago, or for that matter, Indus Valley civilization. When we look at one of the best urbanization models that we actually have of city planning, that's where you look at your waterways, that's where you look at your wasteways, that's where you actually look at how your proximity and density of forest per capita in that sense. Right now, when we are looking at our planning, of course, we can't stop migration, we can't stop cities to grow, but how do you want them to grow is extremely important. If there is decrease in green cover in the heart of Delhi, there's been many documents that says that we do not need more offices and more parking lots and more malls. We have had enough. And I think Delhi needs to degrow, ungrow, or slow grow, as an example. And if we really want yet another stadium and yet another mall, perhaps it should be the smaller towns and other areas. So by design, the way we are looking at faster mobility and infrastructure and energy sufficiency has become a way of life, almost like a standard of living, but we don't realize that energy sufficiency or overconsumption of energy and over access to private mobility, all of that actually has a long-term impact, and by design, we are to be doomed.
Can I ask you, this is an entire issue that can sometimes leave the individual feeling helpless, because we say that this isn't an individual issue. Climate change is not something individuals can do very much about. It's a collective issue. But if anyone is watching this today feeling a little hopeless, what would you say to them in terms of individual action? Is there things that we can demand of?
See, usually I don't write prescriptions for a private solution for public problems, right? As in, why should there be a private solution to a public problem? As in, you and I perhaps can afford to have a private solution, and therefore it will be unfair to really limit this discussion into what you and I could do. Indeed, each one of us will have to look at our own individual footprint, and more so the middle class and upper middle class and the higher classes. We will have to really look at what's my personal footprint and what do I need to do in my private life that can perhaps cumulatively have a bigger impact in overall climate footprint. Indeed, there's caution, there's care, there's your individual responsibility and citizenship, all of those things that we can do. But there's very little that this Earth doesn't have a remote control. You can't really reduce the temperature. You and I, it is doing what it's doing. You and I can reduce the temperature or moderate the temperature of our private room, but not of our public spaces, our playgrounds, our forests, our planet. And therefore, we will have to aggressively beat the climate change danger and the risk that we all are running, and we'll have to look at individual solutions indeed, but individual solutions together to combat this public challenge called local climate change.
Yeah. Mr. Jha, we wish we had more time to sort of ask you more questions, everything. Okay, I'm told we do have time. So can I ask you this? You said we're headed towards doomsday. Are you saying, is it too late already for cities like Delhi, for cities like Mumbai for our urban centers, or do you think it can still be tackled? I'm saying this because we are in a city which is the capital of the country, terrible air during the winter, terrible heat during the summer. We seems to be heading towards, I don't know, should we call it doomsday in your language, in all of the seasons. Is there still something that can be done?
It can be. There is a solution, but solution will not appear on its own naturally, right? As in at the end of the day, you and I, all of us work really, really hard to bring in the AQI to 900 levels. It doesn't happen on its own. We all pollute. If Yamuna's water is E class, which means it's not even fit for animal bathing, it's because you and I really work hard to bring Yamuna to that pathetic state. So every indicator of environment that we're talking about, the local environment, be it our forest cover, be it our air quality, be it our mountains of garbage that we have created, all of that cumulatively creates a system which is counterproductive to overall public health. Because we need to understand that the reason why we need to have conversations about environment is not just for our romance of a great documentary that it can put forth. It is because it has linkages with public health. And when we talk about public health, we're not talking about a Medanta public health. We're talking about the government hospital infrastructure. We're talking about daily wage workers, access to medical care, and their ability to perform and their work. When we talk about morbidity is a very, very big thing. But in India, we don't discuss morbidity as much. We don't even discuss mortality for that matter. Government, the Parliament of India didn't even accept that there are deaths because of pollution in that sense. Because, it clearly denies that people die because of air pollution, because the death certificate doesn't say that, died because of bad air in that sense. So we can reverse this in many, many ways if there is political will and political thinking that enough of our infrastructure development. When we look at infrastructure, we will have to look at our natural heritage, look at our floodplains, look at our water management. Imagine if groundwater has already run out, as per Niti Aayog's own admission, then why are we not doing anything about it? As in, I haven't seen a plan in the last 10 years, or for that matter, in the last 20 years, in looking at, if Delhi's air has become pathetic, or Delhi's water has actually disappeared or has become toxic, this is the roadmap for the next 5 years, for the next 7 years. Similarly, for the heat wave as well. We had the heat wave conditions last year and last year. We've had flood. By the way, right now, you and I are talking about heat wave for the month of April and May, and you and I will actually talk about extreme flooding, like what happened 2 years ago when the Supreme Court of our country was actually inundated by flood water. So we'll have to have a holistic plan rather than piecemeal plan to our climate and to our public environment.
You're clearly saying this is a climate crisis. There is so much that you and I as individuals can do. Vimblendu can build a bud house. I can see if I can use more public transport and try out other things. But till the time there is a policy change on this, and one that is very stringent, we are headed into this year after year. We'd have to deal with them. Mr. Jha, thank you so much for joining us.